Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third session of the day, the impact of technology on worker well-being. My name is Emma Bisco. I am the Learning and Development Coordinator with WWI Work Wellness Institute. And if you've been to our previous sessions, you'll know that I am the one to be guiding you through today's conference. Before I begin, I would like to draw your attention again to that accessibility button on the top right-hand corner of your screen. It's just to the left of the notification bell. Please use this feature to explore all of the accessibility features that FeedLoop offers to make sure that the platform is working best to your needs. And if you would like to enable captions, please press the Live CC transcription button, which should be showing up right below my face here. And if you are experiencing any technical difficulties whatsoever, please find the orange chat box on the left bottom hand corner of your screen, and a member of our team will be there to assist you. With that, I would like to begin our time today by acknowledging that I have the privilege to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. I'd also like to thank all of our partners, our speakers, our funders, and all of you in attendance today for making this conference possible. Before I hand it over to our wonderful panelists, I have a few technical housekeeping points to go through first. We ask that everyone remains muted throughout the presentation, and we encourage you to use the live chat function you see on your FeedLoop screen to add any comments or questions you have throughout the presentation. If you'd like to follow the slides, you can find those under Files. If you just scroll down on your FeedLoop page, you should be able to find them. We will be collecting any questions and comments that you submit in that chat, and we will be ending the session with a question and answer period. For the best viewing experience, I recommend that you choose full screen. There will be a poll during this presentation, so you will be prompted when it shows up, and you'll be able to submit your answer through the Zoom screen. To moderate this panel, we are so pleased to welcome Jamie Burton. Jamie Burton is currently second to CCRW as Chief Business Development Officer and co-owner of VP and Dolphin Digital Technologies. Dolphin is a communication technology firm widely recognized for the use of technology to tackle social issues. Dolphin is the first business in Canada to develop and implement a barrier-free hiring strategy for people with disabilities. Jamie founded Dolphin Disabilities Mentoring Day in 2011, which has grown from one city location to a national event, including 20 cities in 5 provinces across Canada. Jamie has been awarded the BMO Celebrating Women Innovation and Global Growth Award, Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, and the Lieutenant Governor Community Volunteer Award, and Rogers Woman of the Year Entrepreneur. Thank you, Jamie, and over to you to introduce our panelists and session topic.
Good afternoon, and thank you so very much, Emma, and thank you to the Work Wellness Institute for inviting me to participate in this incredible panel this afternoon. I am a mature white woman wearing red frame glasses and have pandemic-influenced gray blonde natural hair. I'm wearing a multicolored pattern blouse and blue open jacket. I've been told I have a nice smile, and today I am smiling, as I am very grateful to be here with you, the participants in our audience, and our most esteemed panelists. We are very fortunate today to have with us Dr. Sarah Tamers, who is the health research scientist at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She also serves as the coordinator of the Research Program Development and Collaboration Arm of Total Worker Health Program and is the assistant coordinator of the Healthy Worker Design and Wellbeing Program and coordinator of the Future of Work Initiative. She has led the development of the National Total Worker Health Agenda, and Dr. Tamers has also led the development of the NIOSH Future of Work Initiative Research Agenda. We welcome you this afternoon, Sarah, and I'm confident that we will learn some great things from you. Also with us today is Catherine Hageruth. She has a Bachelor of Commerce degree and a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Alberta, and is currently completing her doctoral studies at the Haskayne School of Business, the University of Calgary, and holds a CPHR designation. Catherine has over a wealth of experience with 20 years in technology organizations, specializing in strategic planning, stakeholder engagement, organizational change management, and financial management. She's currently a faculty member with the Business Technology Management area and the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Haskayne School of Business. And so it is a pleasure to have you both here with us this afternoon. And in a moment, we'll begin with Sarah. But I just wanted to share with you a perspective of what we're going to hear today. We understand that the title of this webinar is The Impact of Technology and Worker Wellbeing. There's a lot of W's there, so excuse my stumble. What does that mean exactly? We all recognize that we are in a moment of transition. There's new and emerging technologies which are fundamentally transforming the way we work. Automation, AI, digitization. How can our employment solutions match the pace of today's innovation? When systems need to cope with the reality of human diversity, whether it pertains to disability, ethnicity, gender, how can we interpret, or how can they interpret, the complexity of the human dimension? Will they interpret it as an abnormality or an outlier? Bias may initiate negative treatment of some people. So it's necessary for us to understand how we can mitigate the risk of exclusion, anticipate and predict disruption, and manage the impact of the variables of change. Understanding the opportunity of emerging technologies, what impacts your industry and your marketplace, what can negatively affect your workers in every environment, means the difference between psychological safety at work and enhanced well-being. In the employment context, using AI typically has meant the analysis of data to determine which criteria to use when making worker life cycle decisions. So amidst all of this digital transformation, it's critical that employers invest in workers and integrate agile and responsive solutions for evolving worker needs. It's imperative that we bring a disability, diversity, and inclusion lens and awareness to both the opportunities and the challenges of technological changes in the workplace. In order to design the future of changed attitude for diversity and inclusion, it's necessary to plan to disrupt current perspectives. Are we willing to fail forward? The power of being unique is unquestionable. So how do we design technology to be inclusive of innovative traits like resilience, insatiable curiosity, and industriousness? What are the risks of bias AI? How can we ensure that exclusion does not become as ubiquitous as technology is in our workplace? And as workers seek purpose-driven companies, how can we use this opportunity to holistically and with mindful intention build in elements of diversity, inclusion, and opportunity for people with disabilities? And we are so very fortunate to have both Catherine and Sarah with us today. And so I'd like to begin with you. Dr. Tamers, over to you, please.
Thank you, Jamie, for that warm welcome, and hello, everybody. Let me share my screen here so we can get started. So it's a real pleasure to be with everyone here today. I really appreciate the time you're taking out of your busy time to talk about a really important topic here, and that is technology, the impact of technology, emerging technologies on worker well-being. And there's a lot that can be said about that. There's a lot that we will discuss during the Q&A. But since I'm going first here, I thought I would start with a more all-encompassing view, if you will, on navigating worker safety, health, and well-being as the future of work evolves. A little bit of an agenda here for you. We'll start with a brief background on the future of work, which I suspect is familiar to all of us on the call here today. And then I'll touch on some of the efforts of my own institute. We'll then talk about an approach called the total worker health approach, which is an evidence-based strategy that we use to address many, many things, including this topical area of the future of work. I'll then touch on why specifically the total worker health approach is quite unique for the future of work. Then I'll reveal some next steps that we are considering, that we are engaging in, that might be useful for your own efforts. And then very briefly, I'll highlight a few select resources that you can explore post-webinar at your leisure. All right, beginning with this focal area that we call the future of work, which emanated back in the early 2000s and is characterized really by these ongoing and accelerated changes in these three overlapping categories of workplace, work, and workforce, which in turn continue to shape the future of work. So very much the cyclical relationship connecting people, places, and things, and marked also by the fourth industrial revolution or Industry 4.0. Now, as a result of all of these changes and all of this rapid pace, especially over the last few years prior to the pandemic, certainly, there's been increased attention, increased prioritization, increased funding paid to new and existing worker safety, health, and well-being issues with a number of implications. And additionally, as we probably all know as well, many of these became pronounced during the last few years, which, among other things, highlighted a necessity to focus on the future of work, as well as the relevance, the importance of occupational safety and health, and certainly allied fields as well, to address all of these complex issues. Now, these changes, these developments have offered many opportunities, which sometimes can be hard to remember, but they've also posed a number of challenges. And those challenges can be summed up as follows. Tomorrow's workers will undoubtedly, unfortunately, continue to face risks, continue to face hazards, as well as exposures from work, some that are traditional, some that are new, and some that we don't even know about yet. But inevitably complex and increasingly blurred by work and non-work factors. Because of all of this, over recent years, the accelerated pace of these changes across the workplace, work, and workforce, the institute for which I work, NIOSH, decided to launch its own Future of Work initiative. So we have a number of future of work efforts that are more siloed in that they focus on perhaps one topic at a time. And that's been ongoing for years, in some instances, decades. But this was a way to centralize, to coordinate all of those efforts, and then supplement those under one umbrella called the NIOSH Future of Work Initiative. The vision is quite simple, as you see, to prepare workers for a safer, a healthier, and more productive future. It's very much a collaborative effort of multi and transdisciplinary research and many activities within the walls of NIOSH and certainly well beyond, with a multitude of partners. And the aim is to identify novel research solutions, practical approaches then based on those solutions, as well as really engage our partners both domestically and internationally. And very importantly, the initiative advocates the application of the total worker health approach, which I'll cover in just a moment in terms of what it is and why, again, it's quite well suited to address all things future of work. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about our initiative by way of introducing you here to our future of work initiative priority topics and subtopics. So this was the first step that we undertook when we launched the initiative as a way to set the stage, to have a guiding framework, a cornerstone for our future of work research and practice-based activities. And so as you see here at the top, we've identified a handful of just salient issues that impact, again, these three overlapping categories of workplace, work, and workforce. To the left of your screen, top to bottom, you have our 9 priority topics, and then each accompanied by a number of subtopics, in total 63. So our 9 future work priority topics are organizational design, technological job displacement, work arrangements, artificial intelligence, robotics, technologies, demographics, economic security, and skills. And don't worry, I won't read off the 63 subtopics here. But one thing additional thing I want to say about this table is, as you see centrally there, certainly we do have technologies, and of course we parse out here AI and robotics. So this is very much a marker here of the future of work, traditionally, and is with us as well. But what's really, really important to us, and I expect to you as well, but it bears repeating, is that even if we're focused on one particular priority topic, such as technologies, which is fine. Sometimes we have to focus on one topic at a time, but we have to be really cognizant of all of the different interrelationships that exist between one particular topic and so many others, because they are there and they wholly impact the work that we do, even if focused on one particular topic. So it's important that we are aware of that we examine these in such a way, and that we address these in such a way, because that's the only way that we can more successfully improve our worker safety, health, and well-being outcomes. So setting priority topics like this is certainly important. And we've also set goals and objectives for the nation. So that's necessary, but it's by no means sufficient. Once we've done this kind of work, what do we do? Where do we go from here to address all of this that we've identified? Well, at NIOSH, we believe we must do so by focusing on expanded, holistic, integrated, transdisciplinary approaches. So let's take a look now at why. Well, because first we know that the workplace and work heavily contribute to workforce safety, health, and well-being, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But regardless, the workplace and work can be modified to improve worker safety, health, and well-being. Additionally, we know that worker safety, health, and well-being issues are inextricably linked, both on and off the job as well. And related to that, we also know that health and safety related issues that we carry straddle both the work and non-work or home or community or society sphere. Because while we may only wear worker hats during a portion of a 24-hour period, we take these health and safety related issues with us generally no matter where we go. And so this is why time and time again, studies have shown that by using these integrated, holistic, transdisciplinary approaches to jointly and comprehensively impact worker risks, exposures, and hazards, this then leads to more efficacious results, right? Bringing us to our end goal, which is improved worker well-being. At NIOSH, that holistic, that integrated, that transdisciplinary approach is called total worker health. So let me define it for you first here. As you see, it's defined as policies, programs, and practices that integrate, that's a key word for us, integrate, the protection from work-related safety and health hazards with the promotion of injury and illness prevention efforts, and all this to advance worker well-being. I know that can be a bit of a mouthful, so let me break it down for you now. In essence, total worker health is about keeping workers safe. That is the foundation. We then simultaneously integrate to that what we call the 3 workplace Ps, policies, programs, and practices that grow health, and in doing so, we create worker well-being. A few key tenets for you here. Normally we can give whole day workshops on total worker health, so we're really just getting a snapshot, but I do want to share with you some of the key tenets as to what it is, and just as importantly, what it is not. So looking at what total worker health is, it examines how the workplace and work itself can holistically influence workforce safety, health, and well-being. Remember, it's about modifying the workplace and work, not about modifying the worker, not about fitting the worker to the workplace and work. The total worker health approach embraces voluntary and participatory interventions, and associated efforts always protect workers' right and privacy. Looking now to what it is not, the total worker health approach does not blame the worker. If you hear otherwise, it simply isn't total worker health. It's also not consistent with any of the 3 workplace Ps that might discriminate against or penalize workers for their own personal health conditions, health risks, health choices, or create disincentive for improving health. And finally, the total worker health, well, it's not to be confused with what I would call a more traditional siloed health promotion or wellness program that's been implemented without providing that baseline, that foundation, that simultaneous safe and healthful working environment and conditions. So as a result of implementing, of engaging successfully in total worker health efforts, these are the kinds of evidence-based outcomes that one can expect after now nearly 2 decades of total worker health research. So the promise of total worker health is vast, and very importantly, it extends not just to the worker, not just to the employer, but to the worker's family, to community, and society. That trickle effect is there, and we know that to be increasingly important. So increasingly the last few years, and this was before the pandemic, experts have been calling for these next level OSH 4.0 type approaches to better help employers better safeguard their workers, their worker safety, health, and well-being as we think about the future workplace work and workforce. So let me now explain why the total worker health approach is ideal for the future of work among many other areas. Well, because in a nutshell, it builds on our traditional occupational safety and health efforts. So we have a lot of really sound frameworks out there, right? We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. So it builds on this traditional occupational safety and health efforts by broadening existing worker safety, health, and activities to include other factors influencing well-being risks, such as organizational, physical, psychosocial, and not just on, but again, also off the job. Recall that pie chart. It also offers holistic and comprehensive opportunities, not just in safer work, but in higher quality work and better designed work. The total worker health approach also confronts the spectrum of workplace and work risk, hazards, and exposures that impact the spectrum of workforce safety, health, and well-being issues, and at the organizational level, not the individual level. And finally, the total worker health approach not only provides evidence-based research and then practical solutions based on said research, but also efforts that can inform 2 other important pillars to include policy and capacity building. And all this for healthier organizations, for improved worker well-being and that of their families and well beyond. Another reason why the total worker health approach is uniquely suited to address all things future work is because simply there are so many issues relevant to advancing worker well-being using total worker health approaches. This is the 3rd version of such a table that we published. This one was published, our latest one, in 2020, and remains very relevant still today. And what we do here is we list salient, so it's not everything, we could put more here, but salient, prioritized areas where total worker health has a success, where total worker health is focused on, or where we need to be going, right? So there's a lot of possibility here in 10 categories, as you see listed: the prevention and control of hazards and exposures, built environment supports, as well as community supports, compensation and benefits, healthy leadership, organization of work, policies, technology, work arrangements, and workforce demographics. So these are really today and tomorrow, as we think about worker safety, health, and well-being, this is it, what we're focused on, where we have the research, where we're going, and it will continue to evolve. But the point being is so much of this is synergistic with the future of work focal area, thereby, again, making the total worker health approach, by its very nature, its very design, its background, its experience, quite ideal for addressing and tackling all things future of work. All right, now on to some next steps that I thought I would share what we're considering that might be useful in your own work. So let me say that this will come as no surprise, I'm sure, to the people on the call today. The last couple of years in particular, it's as though the world has woken up, perhaps for the first time or perhaps more than ever before, to the importance of the workplace and work for worker safety, health, and well-being, but not just for worker safety, health, and well-being, for far beyond that, right? The impact of the workplace and work on families, on communities, on society. Well, NIOSH would like to capitalize on that momentum so that worker well-being is no longer just a perk or a luxury for some workers, but that it becomes a right and a reality for all of tomorrow's. And as we think about the future of work, as we think about technology, as we think about the future workplace work and workforce, and certainly as we think about the safety, health, and well-being of tomorrow's workers across jobs, across occupations, and across industries, it's really important that we're careful about what we're prioritizing and that we're careful about moving differently if we need to, not always sticking with what's convenient. So here we have some current and emerging issues here. You'll recall that I showed you the table, the Knowledge Future Work Initiative, priority topics and subtopics, which was launched a few years ago. We published that a few years ago, but is still very much relevant today. That said, because of that fast-paced moving future of work, because of all the emerging technologies, we need to keep our pulse. We need to make sure we're paying attention and adjusting as needed. However, we have still been certainly working on certain areas and anticipating for the future. So this is what we have in a nutshell. We'll want to focus on new and existing. Let's not forget the existing. Workplace and work factors impacting new and existing. Worker safety, health, and well-being outcomes on and off the job. So if I break those down, for instance, this is just a for instance, we have a longer list, but one of the big ones is and will be undoubtedly psychological stress, burnout, and other harms arising from hazardous work schedules. Unhealthy supervision is a huge one, as are technological unintended consequences, be they unintended or not. Job flexibility are on the rise, which is great. But with anything positive, sometimes certainly negative is around the corner. And we do see some issues with that, to include the fact that it's not offered to every job, to every occupation, to every industry. So we have to be careful with our equity issues, as well as making sure that the negative aspects of job flexibility don't outweigh the positive. So finding that work-life fit sweet spot is really going to be key, as will be differentiating between those employer versus worker differences, which we know to be quite common. We'll want to continue crafting our tailored interventions for our highest risk and most vulnerable workers, certainly, but what groups are emerging, right? Keeping an eye on who those are as those are developing. What overlapping vulnerabilities are we seeing that are creating additive, maybe even exponential risks, and that need additional attention that we might not have thought of? Ethical competencies, always important in my estimation, underutilized. We'll want to make sure that we have or create sound ones that adjust with time. Yes, ethics can adjust, and then that we incorporate these into training and standards of practice, because it's great to have ethical competencies, but if we don't actually use them, then they don't really serve much purpose. And as we think about the future of work, as we think about technologies, as we think about technology interacting with workers, as we think about surveillance, all these kinds of things, this could not be more important than in this time frame that we're experiencing now. And then a number of future of work and growing and post-pandemic issues, such as those that you're seeing listed here, that have been an issue for a while, very much exacerbated by the pandemic, and unfortunately that we don't see going away for our workers anytime soon. So as we think about next level future research practice policy and capacity building, again, our 4 pillars, as we think about these efforts, they will undoubtedly benefit, be more successful if we weave, through these key threads that we uncover time and time again, and that you might have very well have done in your own work. And so it bears repeating because they are so important. This is not an exhaustive list, but nonetheless. Healthy leadership, always important at all levels. Active worker participation, really giving workers a voice, right? We're not doing things to workers, we're doing things that affect them, that needs to include them at all times. Always ensuring that as much as we can, we offer as many multiple and safe, flexible and safe, healthy options, because one size does not fit all. And it's easy to say that, but are we really doing that, right? We really need to make sure that we're doing that, we're aware of that. Continuing, hopefully, with our proactive and collaborative steps involving numerous partners, but making sure that we're seeing who's at the table. These are 360 complex issues. So the traditional, the known is great, is fine, is necessary. But what's new? Who else can we include at the table? Who needs to be there to help address these very complex issues that don't just impact the workplace, work and workforce, that really impact society as a whole? So let's be sure that we're doing that. keeping an eye on the time here. All right, I'm going to go really quickly through some resources that, again, if you'd like to explore post-webinar, you'll have access to this. I've just selected a few for you here today. These are all free for you. So please feel free to peruse at your leisure. If you would like to learn more about the Future of Work initiative at NIOSH and Future of Work Matters as we're addressing them, you can read more in our foundational paper here to the left of your screen, our priority topics or subtopics. Again, that's available to you open access, so for free. To the right of your screen, just a few months ago, we published our NIOSH Future of Work Initiative Research Agenda, which outlines gaps and objectives for the future workplace, work, and workforce across our priority topics and subtopics. So you can download that at that link there. If you would like some engagement, we also have our own webinar series. In fact, we have a number throughout the Institute, just putting 2 here based on what we've chatted about today for our Future of Work initiative and for our Total Worker Health program. You can view for free past webinars, and you can sign up for upcoming ones. In fact, for the Future of Work initiative, I'm hosting one on the role of robotics in the future of work coming up just this month, June 22nd. So we'd love to have you. Please feel free to join. If you'd like to learn more about what I've chatted about, specifically in terms of how total worker health and healthy work design and well-being principles can address the future of work, a few months ago, we concluded our guest editing of a special issue in an international journal focused on this very topic. So we made all of these open access. You have 30 research papers focusing on practice as well, commentaries, reviews, and you have the link there again as well to explore. All of the things that we're going to be talking about today that you've talked about during this whole series today require solutions for hopefully the safest, the healthiest workplace, work, and workforce of our time, because again, that's our end goal, worker well-being for all, right? So we have a number at your disposal. We had a lot in our arsenal. We created even more. We're tailoring them. We're inventing more. Our partners have new ones as well. These are available again to you for free. So feel free to explore. You can tweak them and make them more ideal for the populations which you serve. And then if you have any questions about anything that we talked about, that we will talk about today, or things that we didn't talk about that you'd be interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You have my email address there. I'd be more than happy to speak with any of you about anything related to this. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jamie, please. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Sarah. And if I can just have a moment more of your time, I just wanted to, actually, I have about 10 questions, but I'm only going to ask you one in this moment. And then we're very fortunate we'll have some time with Catherine after her presentation. And then once we have that conversation with the panelists, we'll also open it up to question and answer. So I suspect there may be a few more questions for you. But I really like the notion of the delineation between workplace, work, and workforce. How do you feel that this has become an imperative in the overall continuum of the worker, as you put it, and this total worker health notion?
Yes, so thanks for that question, Jamie, because it reminds me of something that I wanted to say. And that is, so as you saw on the Future of Work Initiative table, for the purpose of the table, we do parse those out into these 3 categories. But I believe I said, but if I didn't, let me say it now, those are very much, as we all know, overlapping categories, right? So we do parse them out for simplicity, for discussion, for all these things, and because some things are absolutely more attributable to one or the other, but they are very much overlapping. So the way we look at things in the future of work, just as with total worker health and with pretty much all efforts at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, is that we're focused on modifying, on changing, on addressing, on eliminating, on restructuring, on reorganizing, all of those kinds of words, the workplace and work, the job. Right. So while we focus at the organizational level, while we do always include individual level, worker level components, these are always secondary, if not tertiary. Right. So it's not about doing things to the worker. It's not about changing the worker. Certainly, it's about providing opportunities, providing experiences, providing ownership. Absolutely. But it's very much a top-down approach. Those of you who know the hierarchy of controls will recall how that is structured, where we start at the top, eliminating, and then we move down to the individual level. So this is how we address all of these issues. And it's imperative that we do so. I think we we can probably, hopefully all agree, that when we focus not on the social determinants, but when we focus on those individual levels, we don't get very far. So it is, we believe, the responsibility, the opportunity of the workplace, of employers, and many external factors that impact employers to create these safe and healthful workplaces and work so that workers can be safe and healthy, which in turn inevitably rewards the employer, right? Because we make the business case time and time again. We have the literature to show that when you have a safe, a healthy, a well worker, you have a healthy organization. So.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you very much. And you know, I appreciate hearing that from you, because I think it's imperative that nothing that we're talking about today developing is penalistic in any way in response to the individual workers. And I think hearing from you in this, it's apparent to me, and I'm sure to all those listening, this goes beyond those expectations. So then as we move into Catherine's presentation, and Sarah will come back to this after hers, but how do we put this into the context of the emerging technologies and how they interact with workers? And so I'll put that there for continuation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Catherine and see what you have to say about this. And I suspect we're going to hear a little bit of an overlap, but also a very unique perspective from you. So welcome, and I look forward to hearing from you now. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. I will share my screen here. And while I'm doing that, Emma, thank you for your territorial acknowledgement. I'm joining you today from Calgary, so I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people in Southern Alberta who make their home on Treaty Region 7. So thank you for joining me today. And I just want to take a minute. So I'm, as Jamie mentioned, I'm a faculty member here at Haskayne, and I teach a lot of undergraduate students. And they always say to me at the start of the semester, Catherine, why do I have to take your course? I don't need to know anything about technology when I join the workplace. I want to be in finance. I want to be in accounting. I'm going to study real estate, and I don't need to know anything about technology. And I like to show them this puppy. This is not my puppy. My puppy is a little more energetic, but I say, imagine how bored you would be without any technology. And they say, what do you mean? And I said, well, okay, everybody put away your phone. How are you going to chat with your friends? How are you going to, check the scores of a game? Maybe you're interested. How are you going to figure out the bus schedule or the transit schedule you need to get home? So I think in some ways, we take a lot of technology for granted in our lives that we rely on quite heavily. And, for those of you, I've been around a while, and my mom is 94. She does internet banking. I'm very proud of her for doing those things. And I think sometimes we sort of forget that there's maybe some upsides to technology. So I just want to sort of frame the conversation a little bit today around, we do need to be concerned, absolutely, about how all these pieces come together. But I think there's an opportunity to embrace maybe some of our emerging technologies and figure out how we can integrate them to improve well-being of all of our societies. So I'll go into, Sarah mentioned it in terms of the fourth industrial revolution and sort of what that looks like. And what we know, and this is old already, 2016, from the fourth industrial revolution research that was done, 20 billion WhatsApp messages are sent daily. And that in the US, 87% of millennials always have their cell phones with them. 44% of them use those cameras daily. And we have these two emerging pieces in this idea of peer-to-peer sharing and user-generated content. So, historically, I have twins. They're graduating high school. Tomorrow is the last day in the public school system. So that bored puppy dog is probably, really resonating with them today. But for graduation, rather than going to a grandparent or to my husband, my son went to YouTube to figure out how to tie a very specific kind of tie knot that he really wanted to set himself apart with. So this user-generated content on these peer-to-peer platforms are becoming more and more integrated into our daily lives. So I think those are sort of some pieces of this fourth industrial revolution we're seeing that are really going to have an impact. in the workplace and on worker well-being, and how do we make sure that as these pieces roll out, because our younger generation, they expect them kind of now, right? They want some of these things. This is how they learn best or how they prefer to learn. How do we bring those into workplaces so that we can make sure they're used well? And by well, I mean that they're not harmful to workers, right? That they benefit the employees that are engaging with them. And so I think there's some real opportunities as we look at some of these emerging technologies in the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, so what kind of technologies? And this one, you'll laugh, this is an elevator in Paris. In a very, very old building. So building built long before elevator technology. Obviously, this building was retrofit with this elevator. You could definitely not get a North American king size bed in this elevator to get it up to the 4th or 5th floor. That you were probably still hauling up the stairs. But I bring up the picture of the elevator because I think the elevator is a really interesting kind of technological invention that fundamentally shifted how we live and work today, right? When the elevator was first introduced, I think at a World Trade Fair, probably in New York, it took 50 years before people became comfortable with the idea of riding in an elevator to their workplace, if they were working in an office building, to an apartment, right? So we had capacity limits on how high up we would build things because we had no way to get people into those buildings. And it took 50 years for this elevator technology for people to feel comfortable that this could be a daily part of their lives. So I think that's sort of just a little lens I want to bring. Sometimes we talk about emerging technologies and we sort of get into this mindset of, ooh, that's kind of scary, or I don't know what that means. So I think, sometimes if we take a look back historically, some of the technologies that we take for granted today, they had a long time getting into sort of the daily routines of what we do. So before I jump to the next slide, I believe we have a little poll for everyone. Emma, you'll have to let me know. I'm not seeing it, so you'll have to let me know. Oh, there it is. Okay. So yes, here we go. Do you use artificial intelligence at home or at work on a daily basis? So I think we had about 65 folks on the call. There we go. Okay, so about half of you have participated. Okay, so I will, it's being shared. So only a little over 50% of people participated, but thank you for everyone who tried or did. So about 63% of folks are saying that they use some kind of artificial intelligence at home or at work on a daily basis. And 30% roughly are saying, no, not using it. And then a few folks don't know what AI is. So great, we're going to talk about that. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. So there's the results if folks can see it. Okay. So close out. So what is mythical AI? I like to call it. And I think it's, we break it into sort of 3 categories. And on Sarah's slide 7, I believe it was, she actually talked about these, right? In her work bucket, she had AI, robotics, and emerging technologies. And so AI is the sort of broad category that enables computers to mimic human intelligence. So what does that mean? Well, it means it can do things that we, do ourselves, perhaps calculations, computations, taking an average of something. Maybe we're adding up a column of numbers and dividing by the numbers and computing the mean. And then we break it down and we go into some finer categories. And we have this concept now of machine learning. And it's the subset of artificial intelligence that enables the machine to improve its tasks with experience. And it includes this concept of deep learning. So this idea of machine learning, I think, is really, really powerful. And we hear about opportunities where it can be used really interestingly in things like medical diagnosis. So we train an algorithm on, a particular mole as an example. This one's cancerous, this one is not cancerous, and we can feed it and give it, categories, and so it knows what to look for, and it learns so that when it sees a picture, it knows which category it fits into. And so there's some quite powerful, merging sort of pieces that we can imagine out of that. Like, what does that help for diagnostics, for those kinds of things? And then beyond machine learning, sort of that next category down is what we call deep learning. And this case, we're letting the machine learn itself. So we don't tell it that a cat, is a particular head shape with ears and whiskers that look in a certain way, and that this is a dog. We give it a whole bunch of pictures, maybe as an example, feed it dogs, cats, parrots, and it figures out and categorizes them and sorts them into common things based on it. And I'm making really simple examples, but this is basically the kinds of ways that artificial intelligence can help us. So when we think about, where we've seen AI in the past, this is sort of a little brief history. And, for those of you that are history buffs, Enigma helped crack codes in World War II. And we see these different kind of emerging pieces of artificial intelligence, right up to Siri and Alexa, which I think in that category of all of those folks who were, said, oh yeah, I'm using AI on a daily basis, either at home and at work. Certainly, Siri and Alexa come to mind as a really easy, quick way that we all perhaps engage if we're using those tools on a fairly regular basis. For those of you that have a Roomba and it finds its way around vacuuming as it goes, or whatever, this is the kinds of things, that really simple tasks that AI can perform for us. So just a little brief history there. Okay, so I just wanted to do a little bit of AI on its own. The Roomba's great. Love Alexa, love Siri, however that looks, but there's sort of this whole notion of we need technologies to sort of come together. And Sarah said it there on that slide 7, right? In the workforce, in work, we have AI, we have robotics, we have other emerging technologies. And so we have these communication technologies, which lots of us rely heavily on our cell phones or other kinds of wireless technologies. And we're seeing these 6 kind of emerging deployment technologies. 5G, if you are in an area maybe where 5G is rolled out, what does that look like? Low Earth orbit satellites, certainly when things started happening in Ukraine and Russia at the end of February, right? The technology minister in Ukraine did a call out to Elon Musk for low Earth orbit satellites to help them in their campaign. So we're seeing these emerging in very different ways. And they have opportunities that can help us, I think. And so basically just those emerging communication technologies, and we need those technologies, for example, if we wanted to move to self-driving cars, right? We need communication technologies. The car has to communicate with the light standards. It has to communicate with perhaps markers in the road. It has to communicate with other cars or vehicles. And so we have to really have those communication technologies to allow the artificial intelligence to actually talk to anybody. So we see McKinsey did some research and said, okay, if these technologies were actually unveiled and we could roll them out, how would that help organizations? And I don't want to come from the perspective of this just betters the organization, but if we can unlock some value for these companies, maybe it's enhancing new product features, and existing offerings to new markets. For those of us all on Zoom today, this is great. Maybe you have some stable internet. What if you are in a region of the world or in a rural part of Canada, the US, wherever you're joining us from today, and you don't have stable internet, right? You can't take advantage of some of these, technologies that we're seeing, some of these, online school that maybe are a good opportunity for you, maybe that better fit. So how do we help those ones? And then we also are seeing other new products emerging, right? Augmented reality, virtual reality, and huge value in some of those. Virtual reality in terms of training, right? We pilots use it a ton for training. What are some of those other opportunities maybe that we can help workers try things and you try out different ways before they actually have to engage in a particular activity? And then the next way that McKinsey saw more value being unlocked was in productivity improvements. And these can be ways that really help employees do their tasks better and easier, and that can be really beneficial sometimes for us, right? So, we in the post-secondary institution, if you've ever gone through an application process and your file still today gets printed off in paper and someone walks it around a building and tries to find the right people to give it to, maybe that's not the most effective use of your time, or it slows down, maybe gets lost somewhere along the way. So sometimes some of these communication technologies and these other technologies can help us in terms of the skills we need to do. And then how do we, the resources that we have, we know we're resource constrained, coming from Alberta, we know that energy resources, we need to shift to clean energy. We need to make those kinds of changes. How do we get the most with the least sort of consumption of resources that we can, so that we can make the most effective? And then finally, the last one sort of there, how do we, asset productivity? And I think this is a really interesting one for worker safety, from the perspective of we put people into potentially really dangerous situations, whether it's burning buildings, whether it's remote locations to check power lines. Are there ways that we can leverage some of these technologies to say, yes, the artificial intelligence piece combined with a digital twin of a remote site, allows someone to stay maybe in a safer location than actually physically going out there. So I think there's some really interesting things we can start to see as these technologies come together. And again, I don't think they happen in isolation, right? Like Sarah talked about the interconnectedness of both the worker, the workplace, and the work. And I think that's really important, that none of the technologies can function alone, and they really need each other. So I think there's, sort of a lens there that we can bring to it. So I put this guy up. I shared this guy with my undergraduate class as we were finishing up the term in April. And, these are sort of 19, 20-year-olds. And I challenged them. I said, when you hit your sort of mid 30s, maybe 32, 33, maybe you're moving into some kind of leadership role. How are you as future leaders going to navigate a workplace that maybe has robots and humans, right? And now is the time for us to be having those conversations with, students, early career professionals, right? Sarah mentioned the ethics. We have to sort of get these students talking about it at a really early age, that I'm going to face different leadership challenges than maybe my parents did, or certainly my grandparents, right? My workforce will look different. And how am I going to do that in a really thoughtful, kind, and caring way? And so, I get the notes at the end of the term around, did you like this course? Did you not? And I had a number of students this year say, Catherine, it never occurred to me what 15 years out is going to look like, and how the workforce might change, and how am I kind and, helpful and productive member of a future society. And so those are the kinds of conversations I think we need to be having as we sort of roll out the next generation of workers into workplaces. Okay, so this guy, little lamplighter. I don't know where this is a Creative Commons free photo. It wasn't necessarily, didn't convey the essence of what I was trying to get, but I think this is a really good example of where technology displaced workers. And when you read the story of Edison and how Edison convinced people in New York to shift from gas street lights, to electric lights, people thought he was crazy. People said, no, we really like our gas lights. We don't know about this emerging electrical technology. What are you talking about? I'm not sure this is a good idea. But we know, looking back, that the risks associated with lighting those gas lamps were really, really high. And of course, if there was an accident with the gas lamp, the risk for fire through communities was huge. So as this technology changed, and if you want to, really interesting read on emerging technologies in terms of electricity and the electric powered engine. If you read Bjorn Olsen's Machine Platform Crowd, which is really talking about machine learning and crowdsourcing and our platform-based economy, he actually starts the book with talking about electricity and how we used electric engines to replace steam-powered factories, and how that shifted the kind of work people did and shifted how people came together for work. But I think there's an opportunity, if we look holistically at the emerging technologies, at the power of AI, how do we get people out of situations like our gas lamp lighter where they're not safe and get them into workplace situations where they are safe? And how do emerging technologies, how does AI, how do some of these technologies really help us move in that way? So, we talk about the Great Disruption or the Great Resignation. MIT did a study, and I think this is a really interesting little great site to go to if you want to kind of explore. And they looked at, sort of how work has changed since 1940. And we talk about this all the time, right? Things that had not been invented yet. So more than 60% of the jobs done in 2018 had not been invented in 1940. And you can see if, in the colored bars there of the types of roles that are emerging and what shifted. And MIT has great resources and very clear here, right? If you look at the title there, the work of the building better jobs in an age of intelligent machines, we have to be really thoughtful in how we manage this great disruption and how we move through. And I would encourage you, if you're in a role, or you're in an organization, or you're maybe taking on a leadership position or something, that you go and take a look at some of these resources that Sarah shared, or some of the ones that are here in this deck, and really think thoughtfully about, as we move people maybe from that very tall blue production line in 1940 employment into some of these other roles, how do we help people transition? How do we help them go back to school? How do we fund those kinds of things if that's what they need to do or that's what they want to do? How do we help them shift? So, highly encourage you to take a look at that. Okay, but I do think we have a choice. And I'm going to share 2 images with you here, and then just some questions to leave you with as you think about where you're going. And so this first one, sort of the Mad Max, Blade Runner, dystopian Terminator type future world, I think is an option, right? And I think this is where we maybe go to sometimes when we're not sure about the emerging technology. We don't know what AI is capable of. We hear bad stories, absolutely, right? The bias. AI, if we train it, like I said, in that machine learning bucket, and we have built in our biases that we use the algorithm and we train it in, and we don't realize that we're doing it, then we have created an algorithm that has the same bias we had as a human, eliminating sort of that ability of the machine to make a data-driven decision, as we like to call it, right? Because we just trained it with our own biases. That's not a better place. That potentially could put us in this dystopian world. My preferred view of the future is Star Trek. I don't know if there's any Star Trek fans in the crowd, but I think as we think about, clean energy and emerging technologies and using those technologies to create a better future, I think we have these opportunities. How do we free up, if we can, do we tax robots so that we, are not, our governments have resources to draw upon to pursue some of these kinds of things? These are some of the questions I think we have to kind of explore as a society as we move along. And so I'll leave you here with some questions to ask. So these questions are from a book titled The Driver and the Driverless Car. And, a great, lovely read. Professor Wadhwa is, I believe, at Stanford these days. And he really comes up with 3 questions as we think about emerging technologies and AI, and how are we going to leverage them? Does the technology to have the potential to benefit everyone equally? And I think that Sarah really touched on this, right? How do we make sure that the workers are getting, what they need, and that we're not putting it on them, right? This is a cooperative they're engaged in the process. How does it benefit everyone? And, I would add to this question that equally doesn't mean the same, right? What might be better for me as an employee is perhaps to work remotely. And what might be better for a colleague is to not work remotely. And we have to be mindful of those individual differences. The second question he challenges readers of the book with is, what are the risks and what are the rewards? So do we really truly understand those? And are the rewards, do they justify the risks or not? And I think we have to think really carefully about that one. And I think we've learned a lot, coming from a business school. One of the classic cases we study is the Ford Pinto. And, for those who aren't aware, where the gas tank was built in the car, it was prone to explosion upon impact with another vehicle. And the analysis done back, 40, 50 years ago was that the lawsuits would be less costly than redesigning the car. Those are not the kind of ethical decisions we need to be making. We need to be thinking about prioritizing the risks of loss of life over the financial challenges that may occur with redesigning the car. So, that's sort of the classic case of understanding those risks and those rewards. And then the final question is, does the technology more strongly promote autonomy or dependence? And I think it's really important. And we saw this, in Sarah's view, is that how do we ensure we have autonomy, and how do we ensure that people are respected and really can bring their full selves to work, but that work isn't everything. Right. So I think that we really have this opportunity as we reflect on some of these technologies. And he has a great, as an educator, he has a great story in the book around learning about Pythagoras' theorem and calculating the hypotenuse of a triangle and what that might look like in the future as we integrate AI and individual preferences and help along our learning journeys. And so I think there's this, real strong lens is, what are we getting with the technology? Are we getting that, autonomy, or are we just driving dependence, which, we don't want to, nobody likes to be dependent on others. We want to know we can rely on others, but we don't want to be dependent on someone. So I'm going to close it off there and make sure we're keeping to time for everyone this morning. Thanks. As Sarah had, my email is there. Happy to chat with anyone at any time. And Jamie, back to you.
Thank you so very much, Catherine. I'm scribbling away here trying to decide how many questions we can fit in for you. And I just want to remind everyone, we will have audience questions in a moment. But Catherine, I do have a first question for you, and then we'll bring Sarah in and have an opportunity for us to engage together. And it was just coming back to that notion of emerging deployment technology and how it can influence things. Do you have any examples of how this might be prevalent in this notion of equality, equity, the difference between the two, and sort of some of those considerations that you spoke to, different settings? What if they have a different experiential circumstance? So whether it be rule, or whether it be access to, or whether it be facilitation of, based on barriers that are built in. Can you just help me maybe position that with an example that you're well aware of that's working well and does take into some considerations of those factors?
Yeah, so great question. Thanks, Jamie. I'll start with something really close to home. And I think when the pandemic started and we shifted to online learning, there was this perspective that online learning is less than in-person learning. Right. And so, we heard this, we saw, some student groups were like, oh, we should get a tuition reduction because my experience isn't as good. And I think as an educator, actually, I saw something different. And what I saw was we have students who love that in-person experience and who thrive feeding off of each other in the classroom, and they relish that opportunity to stick their hand up and speak publicly in front of all their peers, and they feel confident, they're happy to do that. And that was a really great experience for them. But what I noticed when we switched to online is I saw a whole different group of students participating in a way that I didn't normally see in a physical classroom. And so my chat line was busier in my virtual classroom than my physical classroom ever had been. And so, we took that away at the school and said, okay, we know there's a certain population of students. Yes, we like to have them together. You can see behind me is our new building that we're currently is under construction. We love, having students together. We love that energy. As an educator, I love that energy in the room. But there's a population of students who really benefit from not having to physically come to class, right? They have challenges in terms of getting to class. When we started doing sections of both in person and virtual, and you could choose based on what was the best circumstance for you and how you like to participate, that really opened up for students, at least, this option of, oh, this is not about what's best for the faculty member or what's best for the school or best for parking services in terms of revenue generation. This is how I need to learn, how I learn best given what's going on in my life. And so I think that's a really tangible example for me that really hit close to home. That was sort of an aha moment, because we came in with this assumption that everybody hates online learning, and that wasn't true.
No, thank you for that example, Catherine. I've heard this from others, and I agree with you. I think it comes down to providing choices, how we present opportunities to interact with each other. And, at this point, I'd like to bring in Sarah, because that takes me to a question that I have for both of you, sort of this contextual notion of the influence of COVID on us. And as we look at the variables of technology as they progressed very quickly when we all had to do things differently. And that included the worker relationship, that included the context and notion of the workplace. And it certainly included this whole what I see foundational element of the worker and total worker health. And so is that in this moment, with the considerations and learning of COVID, the opportunity for that to be this notion of total worker health, the fulcrum in the design of these emerging technologies? And what, if any, consideration have you given this, or what have you seen in the marketplace that reflects these learnings? Sarah, I'll start with you and see if there's something there that resonates with you.
Sure, thanks, Jamie. So as I mentioned, I think Catherine touched on this as well. We're living in a very challenging, odd time is well, that's all I'll say about that. But there are some wonderful things that have emerged, and it can be difficult to remember that. And because we are a population as human beings who tend to forget lessons, I don't know what's going to stick or not. However, at this point in time, there is this momentum, there is this realization globally that the workplace and work are so pivotal for not just the safety, health, and well-being of the worker, but as I mentioned, far beyond that, that there is this absolute trickle effect that was always there, of course, but that there is this absolute trickle effect into families, into communities, into societies, and that when the workplace and work are not sound, not only are the workers not sound, but society is not sound. So the fact that there is finally this waking up, this awareness of that, provides us with a momentum, provides us with more interest from others who perhaps might not have been as interested, as curious about measures such as frameworks such as total worker health, and really that in order to be a healthy organization, a healthy society, you have to have healthier workers. And in order to do that, you need to invest on the front end so that on the back end, you can see the kind of benefits that you're looking for as an employer, as stakeholders and so forth, as partners and so forth. So there's definitely been more of an interest in total worker health from occupations, industries, sectors, partners that might not have been as curious had it not been for the horrificness that the pandemic it ensued when it comes to our workplaces. So that's the, call it silver lining, if you will, that I'm, that warms my heart. And I do hope this momentum keeps. I do hope that we heed the lessons that we have hopefully learned. And I do hope that we have concrete and sustainable change so that we do have the healthiest workforce than we've had in a very, very long time, if not ever before. So that is my sense. That is my hope. to be determined as the future of work evolves.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. I think we can all agree that sustainability is what we're looking for now. We're waiting to see exactly what's going to be consistent over time. Catherine, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Sarah said. I think, we have this opportunity and we've seen, worker health and what the pandemic did in terms of sort of both extremes, right? For those folks who were maybe in organizations that embraced remote work and they, suddenly could maybe be available for kids or elder care. And those workplaces were really strong in those areas and had a lot of trust. I think there's a foundational element of trust in that conversation. I think those workers and those organizations, that trust grew and people were appreciative of being at the bus stop when the kids came home from school, and the relationship was strengthened. And then I think we see the opposite extreme where, and we've heard some of this maybe in the news recently, that I don't trust you if I can't see you. So everybody back in or go find a pretend job somewhere else in your pajamas or whatever the quote was recently, in the press. And I think in those organizations, I think the opportunities that the pandemic maybe brought in terms of remote and work-life balance, I think those will be eroded really quickly. I guess I would argue probably those workplaces, if your leader has that lack of trust in you in the first place, you probably had other challenges even prior pandemic, quite frankly, from a leadership perspective. So, I do think there's sort of that. I think the one thing I worry about, I guess, is when I think about pre-pandemic versus maybe long post-pandemic work, there are still a number of industries and roles that can't benefit from remote work, right? You think about nurses, you think about kindergarten teachers, and I think we need to think more holistically as a society, how do we support them given that they can't participate in this remote work, can't move to, be in another location and participate in the same way. So I think we have an opportunity as a society to think maybe more holistically about those that aren't participating.
Well, I agree with you completely. And I recognize that, that can be challenging for some because it's all about perspective. You know what you know and what you're experiencing. You hear from those immediately around you what their perspective and experience is. But how do we connect holistically to all of those other dynamics of what we're realizing is an imperative in this moment of change? And I think, when I listened to both of you, there was this spark that occurred when I heard the premise of user-generated context and that peer-to-peer strategy and that recognition of the continuum of the worker. And so while I'd love to speak with you and extrapolate on those further, I'd like to take that theme perhaps now into the audience and those who are attending to see if they have questions from their perspectives and experiences in their workplaces. And understanding in this moment, we're all learning, and it's important that we recognize there's value in all of us so that we can gainfully understand our next steps in the future of work. So I'm going to open it now to see if there is a question from anyone, or I'll go back to either Sarah and Catherine to see your response on tailored interventions. And, to that notion, Sarah, of not blaming the worker if there is something that's required. Perhaps, Sarah, you'd like to respond to the impact that we can have from the learnings of those tailored interventions. And how we develop and hope to influence the development of technology as we go forward.
Sure, thanks, Jamie. So one thing I'll say, I said it, but I want to say it again. In the resources that I offered, the special issue that we guest edited recently, where you have 30 open access papers, a number of those discuss tailored interventions for various occupations and industries. So if anybody on the line today is interested, I would encourage you to go there. We have many, many more, but that's one place where you can certainly find a number of those, and then that will take you to a number more. So lots of work in total worker health on tailored interventions across a number of jobs, occupations, industries, workers, worker needs, worker safety, health, and well-being issues across the line. Of course, we haven't done everything everything, but a lot has been done. So there's a lot that you can read there and apply for those of you who are interventionists, perhaps in your own work. In terms of the tailoring, it speaks to the difference, as you touched on, Jamie, between equality and equity, right? Not one and the same. And so we have to understand where we want to be. And so by tailored intervention, I'm speaking of the ones that really understand and ingrain within their structure a one size does not fit all approach across the line at all times, even when it's inconvenient, right? And so that's the tailoring. But as we talk about the future of work, it can be easy to focus on, as we were touching on, what we know, what we've done, what we can see with this vision. But are we really seeing that 360 perspective? What is being untapped? We assume that certain groups are going to continue to be higher risk, going to continue to be vulnerable, and maybe they will, unfortunately. But what new groups of workers, of workplaces, of work types, especially as new ones, as Catherine was pointing out, new jobs, new occupations, new industries will go away and will emerge. So keeping an eye on what those are so that we have those tailored interventions for these different groups, that might require really, really fast research and thinking, because we don't need practical solutions yesterday. We need them, or tomorrow rather, we need them yesterday or today.
Yeah, excellent. I couldn't agree more. Catherine, what do you think peer-to-peer strategy can respond to, some of the problems that we've seen and been exposed to during this?
Yeah, I think, we absolutely, from a peer-to-peer perspective, like I think sometimes, I'll cite the example of the Volkswagen emissions scandal, right? And I cite that as, here's where people saw something that they thought was unusual with their vehicle, and on a peer-to-peer platform, they uncovered and started having these conversations. And I can't help but wonder, as we sort of look out, you may have a unique situation in your organization. I love Sarah's comments that it's not a one size fits all. How do I get my, how I have this unique situation? How can I reach out across maybe the whole globe to find another organization, another leader, another worker who has a similar situation? How do I, intervene in that way? Because I do think we tend to look close to home. Right? We talk to people in our network, we sort of figure out and we try to brainstorm the best we can, but I don't know that that's always the best way, right? We probably have this opportunity with technology to reach a wide variety of people who can help us solve a problem in a really unique way. So I think those peer-to-peer platforms, as we encounter really new and novel situations and have different scenarios, we can leverage those to help us come up with interventions that are appropriate. Because I think absolutely that, back to from an educator perspective, not one size fits all in every student. Every student needs different approaches. Every worker needs a different approach as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Catherine. I'm laughing because in the last 2 weeks, I've given a presentation where I extrapolated on the premise of one size fits all. I don't believe there's any such thing, because if you look at me with my size 11 feet and my differently proportioned body as a 5'10" woman, it's not true. And so how do we respond to these assertions where we're telling people that this is how they should and need to function, when the parameters of that functionality is relative only to some and not all, and yet we're asking them to conform to things that actually are not a fit. And so when we understand this notion of the speed at which technology is changing, how do we look at the variety of variables in our human experience and really come to an understanding that it is about engaging and allowing for that opportunity to ask the user, ask the person, ask the employee, ask the worker how they need to succeed. Sarah, you touched on it certainly when you displayed your 9 primary topics and 63 subtopics. And so I'm going to ask the both of you, where is the power of evidence-based learning in this moment, and how do we maximize the potential of the human elements that we all bring to work? Sarah, why don't we start with you, and we'll wrap up on these questions and then turn it back over to Emma. So go ahead, Sarah.
Sure. So let me keep it brief. A lot we could share here. I guess I'll just focus on giving workers a voice at all times, right? If you do that, it's hard to go wrong. I mean, if you do that and you actually heed that, rather, it's hard to go wrong. We have even very well-intentioned employers who roll out policies, programs, and practices to improve worker safety, health, and well-being. And guess what? They didn't give workers a voice. They didn't do their needs assessment, their formative evaluation, let alone their process evaluation or summative evaluation. And then what they've rolled out doesn't actually meet the needs of their workers. So it's great to have these things, but if it's not actually meeting the needs of your workers, then it's a waste of resources, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort. And in the end, it's not even getting you to where you want to be. So bottom line, giving workers a voice at all times, heeding as much as you can, understanding that different employers and organizations, especially when we're talking about small businesses with limited resources, we understand, but there are always steps that even the smallest of business, even those that are suffering with the most limited resources, can take. And if you start with giving your workers a voice, creating that culture of trust, as Catherine was touching on, and these basic foundational elements, so much is possible. So I'll leave it there and turn it to Catherine for her thoughts.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. I would echo everything Sarah said. And, I think that the voice is really important. And we do this in the classroom where we survey students at the start of the semester. What's always interesting is I often will get a bimodal hump of, 1/3 of the class wants X, 1/3 of the class wants Y, and the last third wants Z. And so that you truly can't do one size fits all. Can you even do 3 sizes fits all? And so sometimes, but we'll take it back to students and say, this is what we heard from you, and you're very polarized as a group, right? And I think the same applies to employee population. So great to collect the data. Sometimes I think you have to go back to them and say, we can't do everything that everybody wants. How do we prioritize the things that are most important? Because, Sarah's example of a small business, you've only got, very limited budgets for certain things. What's really the most important? Is it expanding the healthcare program? Is it extra days off, right? We can't offer you both at this time, but let's have a conversation as a population around what we can do, what's reasonable, and get that feedback.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I will leave it there with give workers a voice and create a culture of trust and conversations. I would suggest should be organically occurring and holistic in nature. And hopefully at that, we will have the fulcrum that brings us together in this moment of a fast moving technology change in the context of a society and a world, I would suggest, that is responding from the impact of COVID and these emerging technologies. And instead of a collision, we're seeing potential and opportunity. And it's imperative in this moment that we recognize there is value in everyone so that everyone can add value, and how to remain, that introspective approach where we can ensure that we're striving for inclusion and we recognize the diversity of the human experience as workers in the workplace doing work. Thank you both, Sarah and Catherine. It has been my pleasure to be with you today on this panel. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you so much to all of you for those wonderful words and concluding insightful thoughts. It was wonderful. Jamie, Sarah, and Catherine, our sincerest thanks. As we near the end of our day together, I'd like to hand the word to Dr. Stockdale for some closing remarks, after which I will provide some details on our last activity of the day, so stay tuned. But for now, Dr. Stockdale, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's always bittersweet when you come to the end of a conference and you recognize the time, the energy, the effort that has gone into the production of an event like this. And then sitting back and reflecting on what you've learned and the new group of people that you've been introduced to that are that have similar interests that you do. At this point, I think it's really important to recognize the work of our team here in the organization. The dedication, the hard work, and frankly, how motivated they were to bringing you a conference where you could take away that new information that changes how you think about the future of work, and then creating a larger community of people that can influence change for the better. In putting together this conference, our team has learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way, and those will be applied to the next conference. And for that, I would like to thank our stakeholder community, our panelists, our moderators, our conference partners, not only for your time and expertise, but your willingness to share, to help us understand, and provide an opportunity to grow and become better at what we do. So we'll take those opportunities to learn and apply it to our next conference. The discussion today was more than just about a hybrid work environment or the expanding gig economy. It was about challenging the orthodoxies in the face of a changing society that are brought on by disruptive events and advancing technology. I think what I really heard today was this idea that we need to reconsider what needs to be done in an office environment, and it asks us to reimagine and be innovative as to where work is being done. I think it's incumbent upon us to put those lessons into practice, to rise to the challenges ahead, and recognize that the underlying theme to all of this is equity, diversity, and inclusion. The conference we just had told us inclusive, equitable workplaces was the right thing to do, but it also told us that safe, healthy, and inclusive workplaces are necessary for managing the future of work. And I think it's all achievable if we make that commitment now. That was a lot to pack in over the course of a day, but we hope you take away a better understanding of the research initiatives and the programs that are out there, and that it made you think critically about the future of work and your role in creating that future. So once again, thank you for attending the conference today, and we look forward to seeing our third conference in the fall. And with that, I'll turn that back over to Emma.
Great. Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Stockdale. Hopefully everyone is feeling inspired and ready to make the commitment towards a healthier future of work. And what better way to make those commitments than in a community that shares the same goal? This is why I encourage you to join us in networking for our last bit of time together today. You can find that networking tab in your menu where you'll see all the other people in attendance today. You can chat privately or have a video conversation. You can leave messages in our live chat, take a photo with your colleagues in the event feed, visit the exhibitor booths, check out the showcase gallery for research posters and research, as well as the final designs from our live graphic recording. A few final notes to wrap up our session. There are the presentation slides in here. We will also be posting the recorded video as well as the slides on our website. And again, if you are interested in receiving a certificate of attendance, please navigate to the accreditation opportunities in the menu. By purchasing all 3 panel certificates, you will receive an annual WWI membership guaranteeing unlimited certificates for e-courses, webinars, and more. And again, organizational individual WWI members will be receiving these free certificates. When the session finishes, you will see a QR code pop up on your screen. You can scan this or follow the link my colleague Sophia Lee posted in the chat and add your key takeaways to our thought cloud. But most importantly, before you leave this page, please remember to fill out the session survey, which you will find linked in the description. You will also receive an email from Feedloop with an invitation to fill out a survey for the entire conference. Please take the time to fill this out so we can keep working towards delivering relevant, timely, and engaging learning opportunities for you all. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today, and I hope to see you in our various networking channels.